At dinner, my stepmother told me I had no home anymore and kicked me out. I'm Lillian Harper, 28, and I never imagined my own family would betray me like this. It was a tense Sunday dinner in Nashville, Tennessee, when their words struck like a lightning bolt. You are not part of this family anymore. Don't come back. My heart stopped as I stared at them, my fork dropping onto my plate with a clatter. My stepmother Sandra's eyes were ice cold, my father David's face blank as stone, and my stepbrother Kyle just sat there with that familiar smirk plastered across his face. Before I could even process what was happening, they stood up in unison, pointing toward the front door like some twisted jury delivering a verdict. I stumbled out into the humid Nashville night, my legs shaking. The door slammed behind me, and I heard the deadbolt click into place. The spare key in my purse suddenly felt as worthless as fool's gold. I pounded on that door until my knuckles were raw, shouting until my voice cracked, but no one answered. My entire world had just collapsed in the span of 5 minutes. No explanation. No warning. Just their cold, calculated dismissal echoing in my ears. I checked into a rundown motel off Music Row, my mind spinning like a broken record player, trying to piece together why they had done this to me. Was it because I'd refused to join the family's catering empire? Because I dared to chase my dream of becoming a food blogger and cookbook author instead of slinging pulled pork sandwiches at corporate events? Growing up under the Harper Catering Company banner meant living in the shadow of my stepmother's iron-fisted rule. Sandra Harper had built that business from a single food truck into Nashville's premier catering service, and she ran it like a drill sergeant commanding troops. Corporate lunches, wedding receptions, music industry parties, you name it, Harper Catering had a stranglehold on it. Every dinner conversation revolved around client complaints, menu planning, or profit margins that never seemed high enough for Sandra's taste. Dad had married Sandra when I was 15, bringing me into a ready-made family that never quite felt like home. Kyle, 5 years older than me, was Sandra's golden child who could do no wrong. He thrived in the catering world, soaking up Sandra's praise like a sponge absorbs water. Meanwhile, I was the odd one out, the dreamer who'd rather experiment with new recipes than calculate food costs. A week later, my phone buzzed with an email that made my blood run cold. It was from their lawyer, Thomas Mitchell. We have a problem. Call immediately. My stomach dropped into my shoes. 1 week ago, they had coldly thrown me out and declared I was no longer family. And now, through their attorney, they were practically begging for my help. I stared at those words on my cracked phone screen and let out a bitter laugh that echoed through my tiny motel room. I'd always been different from the Harper clan. While Sandra barked orders about portion sizes and Kyle schmoozed with clients, I'd sneak away to write food blog posts on my laptop, dreaming of cookbook deals and television appearances. Food was my passion, but not the way they saw it. To them, it was just business, profit margins and efficiency. To me, it was art, storytelling, culture wrapped up in every bite. You need to focus on what matters, Sandra would snap whenever she caught me photographing my latest creation instead of prepping for an event. Her eyes would narrow to slits whenever I mentioned my food blog, which had slowly been gaining followers. Blogging doesn't pay the rent, Lillian. This business does. Kyle would always chime in with his favorite refrain, still playing food photographer, Lily? He'd drawl, using the nickname he knew I hated. Maybe try focusing on real work for once. Even Dad, who used to encourage my cooking experiments when I was younger, had grown quiet over the years, muttering things like, the business keeps us all fed, whenever I brought up my writing. My saving grace had been Grandma Rose, my father's mother who had passed away 3 years ago. Rose Harper wasn't like the rest of them. She'd sit with me in her cozy kitchen, her weathered hands steady as she taught me family recipes that went back generations. Food tells stories, honey, she'd say, her voice warm as honey butter. Your recipes have something special, don't let anyone convince you otherwise. We'd spend hours testing new flavor combinations, and she'd listen patiently as I read her my blog posts about the history behind Southern comfort foods. She'd make notes in the margins of my recipe drafts, her careful handwriting full of encouragement. Keep going, Lillian, she'd whisper, no matter what Sandra or Kyle said. Your voice matters. When Grandma Rose passed, she left a hole in my life that nothing could fill. But the pressure from Sandra and Kyle only intensified. The catering business was everything, our legacy, they called it. When I was younger, I'd help out at events, setting up chafing dishes and arranging dessert tables. But even then, I'd sneak away to take notes about flavor profiles and presentation ideas for my blog. By my mid-20s, I'd moved out to pursue my food writing dream full-time. I'd landed a few freelance gigs with local Nashville magazines, and my blog was starting to attract attention from cookbook publishers. But when a potential book deal fell through last year, I had to swallow my pride and move back home, my savings account drained and my confidence shattered. The looks on their faces when I walked through that door said everything. I was a failure who couldn't make it in the real world. Living back home felt like walking through a minefield. Every day, Sandra pushed me to abandon my hobby and join the family business permanently. Back under Sandra's roof, the pressure was suffocating. "Lillian, this is your chance to stop playing around," she'd say, sliding catering contracts across the kitchen island like they were legal documents. Harper Catering had grown into Nashville's go-to service for music industry events, and Sandra expected me to fall in line without question. I'd sit through endless meetings about barbecue sauce suppliers and napkin colors, my mind drifting to the cookbook proposal I'd been revising for months. At night, I'd lock myself in my childhood bedroom, typing frantically on my laptop, crafting blog posts about authentic Nashville hot chicken or the secret to perfect cornbread. I'd pitch food magazines and publishing houses, hoping for that one break that would change everything. But rejection emails kept piling up like unpaid bills, and Sandra's voice echoed constantly in my head, "This isn't a game, Lillian. You need to grow up and face reality." Kyle made everything worse with his constant needling. He'd barge into my room without knocking, glancing at my laptop screen with that trademark smirk. "Still writing your little food diary?" he'd taunt, his voice dripping with disdain. "When are you going to realize nobody cares about your artisanal whatever?" He'd thrived in the business world, charming clients at the Grand Ole Opry and securing contracts with record labels. Sandra practically glowed with pride whenever Kyle landed a big account, while I felt invisible in my own home. Dad stayed out of most conflicts, his eyes glued to spreadsheets during our increasingly tense family dinners. "Just try giving this a real shot, Lil," he'd mutter occasionally, barely looking up from his financial reports. "The business is solid. Reliable." That word felt like a prison sentence, reliable, predictable, soul-crushing. I kept writing anyway, staying up past midnight perfecting recipes and crafting stories about Nashville's rich culinary heritage. Last spring, I'd managed to land a part-time position with a local food magazine, writing restaurant reviews and covering food festivals around Tennessee. It wasn't much, but it felt like validation, proof that my voice mattered. Then the magazine lost funding 3 months ago. Budget cuts eliminated my position along with half the staff. I was devastated, watching my dreams crumble like an overbaked biscuit. With nowhere else to turn and my bank account running on fumes, I packed my bags and moved back into my childhood bedroom. Sandra's triumphant smile when I walked through that door still burned in my memory. "Ready to try something that actually works?" she'd said, already pulling out employee handbooks and scheduling software. Within hours, I was back in the Harper Catering uniform, forcing smiles at country club events while my notebook full of recipe ideas gathered dust. Every day felt like a battle between who I was and who they wanted me to be. Sandra would drag me to client tastings, introducing me as our newest team member while I nodded along, my dreams feeling more impossible with each passing day. The final confrontation had been building for weeks like storm clouds gathering over the Cumberland River. I sat across from Sandra and Dad at our dining room table, Kyle smugly occupying his usual spot, the air thick enough to cut with a carving knife. The clink of silverware against plates was the only sound until Sandra broke the silence with surgical precision. "Lillian, we need to discuss your future with this family," she said, her voice sharp as a cleaver. I knew what was coming, another lecture about abandoning my silly food blog and committing fully to Harper Catering. But tonight, something inside me had shifted. I was done being their punching bag. "I'm not giving up my writing," I said, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "Food blogging and cookbook writing, that's my passion, Sandra. That's who I am." Sandra's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her wine glass. "Passion doesn't pay for this house, Lillian. This family built something real, something lasting. You're throwing it away for Instagram posts and fantasy book deals." The dismissal in her tone made my blood boil. "It's not fantasy. I've been published in 3 magazines this year. I have followers who actually care about authentic Southern cuisine, not just corporate catering contracts." Kyle couldn't resist jumping in with his usual venom. "Followers? You mean the 12 people who liked your last post about cornbread? He laughed, the sound grating against my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. Face reality, Lily. You're not cut out for the big leagues. Something snapped inside me. Years of suppressed frustration came pouring out like grease from an overheated fryer. At least I'm trying to create something meaningful, Kyle. All you do is follow Sandra's orders like some trained seal. Dad, who'd been silent as usual, finally spoke up, his voice low and dangerous. That's enough, Lillian. You're embarrassing this family. The word embarrassing hit me like a physical blow. I turned to him desperately, searching for any trace of the father who used to encourage my cooking experiments. Dad, you remember how I used to make those Sunday morning pancakes? How proud you were when Food and Wine featured my biscuit recipe. Why can't you support me now? He looked away, jaw clenched tight. That was different. You were younger then. Sandra stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor like fingernails on glass. This is your home, Lillian, but only if you're actually part of this family. If you choose this ridiculous blogging nonsense over us, then you need to leave. My world tilted sideways. What are you saying? Her face could have been carved from marble. You are not part of this family anymore. Get out. Kyle's smirk widened while Dad stared at his plate like it held the answers to life's greatest mysteries. I stood on shaking legs, grabbed my purse, and looked around the dining room one last time. You can't be serious. But Sandra just pointed toward the door like she was directing traffic. Now. I stumbled outside into the muggy Nashville night, the front door slamming behind me with the finality of a coffin lid. I heard the deadbolt turn, sealing me out of the only home I'd known for 13 years. A week later, I was still holed up in that depressing motel near the airport, my life crammed into 2 suitcases and my laptop bag. The email from Thomas Mitchell, their family lawyer, arrived like a bolt from the blue. The subject line made my heart skip, Rose Harper Estate Trust, urgent. My fingers trembled as I opened it. You are entitled to assets under a trust established by Rose Harper. Please contact me immediately regarding your inheritance. Inheritance? Trust? I hadn't heard anything about Grandma Rose leaving me anything beyond her recipe box and some family photos. I dialed Thomas's number with shaking hands. Lillian, he said, his voice professional but warm. Your grandmother established a comprehensive trust for you before she passed. It guarantees your right to remain in the family home and provides substantial funding to pursue your food writing career. I nearly dropped the phone. The family home, where Sandra had just locked me out of, and money to support my dreams? I don't understand. Why didn't anyone tell me about this? The trust was activated upon your 28th birthday, which was last month. Your family was notified of its existence when Rose passed, but they chose not to inform you. There's more, Lillian. Rose left a personal letter explaining everything. The documents arrived at my motel room the next morning, a thick manila envelope containing legal papers I could barely understand and a sealed letter in Grandma Rose's familiar handwriting. I tore it open, tears already blurring my vision. My dearest Lillian, it began, I've watched Sandra try to mold you into something you're not, and I've seen your father lose his backbone when it comes to protecting you. This trust is my way of ensuring you can follow your dreams without their interference. I clutched the letter to my chest, sobbing. She'd seen it all, Sandra's manipulation, Dad's weakness, Kyle's cruelty. She'd planned this safety net for me. The house is rightfully yours to claim, she continued, and the funds are specifically earmarked for your food writing career. I've left enough to cover living expenses, cookbook publication costs, and even that food blog network you mentioned wanting to start. Don't let them convince you that your dreams don't matter. The trust details were staggering. Rose had set aside nearly $200,000 specifically for my career development, plus legal ownership of the family home that Sandra had been treating as her personal kingdom. There was even a clause ensuring I could evict any current residents if necessary. Thomas explained the situation over the phone. Your stepmother and stepbrother have been managing certain aspects of the trust inappropriately. There are significant discrepancies in the financial records. My stomach clenched. What kind of discrepancies? It appears they've been using trust funds for Harper Catering business expenses, equipment purchases, marketing campaigns, even Kyle's new BMW. We're talking about nearly $50,000 in misappropriated funds. The betrayal cut deeper than their words at dinner. They hadn't just kicked me out, they'd been stealing my inheritance for years, probably hoping I'd never find out about it. That night, I reread Rose's letter until I had it memorized. She'd written about my childhood, how I'd stand on a step stool in her kitchen, carefully measuring flour for her famous dinner rolls. Sandra wanted you to fit her mold, she wrote, but I saw your fire, your creativity. This trust is your freedom, sweetheart. Use it. The confrontation took place in Thomas Mitchell's downtown Nashville office, the city skyline glittering behind floor-to-ceiling windows. I sat across from Sandra, Dad, and Kyle, their faces a mixture of defiance and barely concealed panic. Thomas stood at the head of the mahogany conference table, his briefcase open and legal documents spread out like evidence at a trial. "We're here to address the Rose Harper Trust and its systematic mismanagement," Thomas began, his voice carrying the weight of legal authority. I gripped Grandma Rose's letter in my lap, drawing strength from her words. Sandra's perfectly applied lipstick couldn't hide the tension in her voice. "Mismanagement? That's completely ridiculous. We've been careful stewards of Rose's wishes." Kyle leaned back in his leather chair, arms crossed, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite his cocky demeanor. Dad stared at the table like he was trying to disappear into the wood grain. Thomas didn't even blink. The trust was established specifically to ensure Lillian's right to the family home and provide funding for her food writing career. Yet over $50,000 has been withdrawn without her consent and funneled directly into Harper catering operations. He slid a stack of bank records across the table. These transactions trace back to unauthorized withdrawals approved by Sandra and Kyle Harper, with David Harper's signature as co-trustee. Kyle's smugness cracked slightly. Those were legitimate business expenses that benefited the family. I found my voice, surprised by how steady it sounded. "Benefited the family? You bought yourself a BMW with my inheritance money, Kyle. And Sandra, you renovated the entire Harper catering kitchen using funds my grandmother left for my dreams." Sandra's face flushed red. "We built that company from nothing, Lillian. We deserve compensation for years of hard work. You've contributed nothing but attitude and unrealistic expectations." Her words stung, but this time they couldn't break me. "Contributed nothing? I worked for free at your events for years, while you told me my real dreams were worthless. Grandma Rose saw what you were doing to me, and she made sure I'd have a way out." Thomas continued his methodical presentation, showing bank statements, forged authorizations, and email chains that painted a clear picture of financial manipulation. "This constitutes a clear violation of fiduciary duty. Lillian is entitled not only to the house and remaining funds, but also to damages for the misappropriated amount." Kyle's mask finally slipped completely. "You're not taking anything, Lillian. You'll just waste it all on your stupid food blog that nobody reads." His outburst only strengthened my resolve. I stood up, my voice ringing with newfound confidence. "I'm done with this family. I want the house that's rightfully mine, and I want every penny of the trust that Grandma Rose left for my writing career. As for you three, you can figure out how to run Harper Catering without stealing from me." The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Sandra's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You can't just waltz in here and destroy everything we've built." I met her gaze without flinching. "You destroyed it the moment you kicked me out of my own home and stole my inheritance. Grandma Rose knew exactly what kind of people you really were." Thomas nodded, making notes. Lillian's demands align perfectly with the trust's original terms. The house deed will be transferred to her name, and all remaining funds will be released to her account immediately. Additionally, you'll face a full audit for the misappropriated funds, and repayment will be required within 90 days. The color drained from Sandra's face, and Kyle slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. Dad finally looked up, his eyes filled with something that might have been regret, but it was too little, too late. "You could have supported me," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "Instead, you stole from me and tried to kill my dreams. I'm taking what's mine and starting over." 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of the house that was now legally mine, sunlight streaming through windows that Sandra could no longer bar me from. The foreclosure notice for Harper Catering had made the Nashville Business Journal, their reputation in tatters after the trust scandal became public knowledge. Several high-profile clients had jumped ship, and the financial penalties had crippled their operations. I'd blocked their phone numbers after Sandra's desperate attempts to negotiate some kind of settlement. Kyle had left one venomous voicemail about how I'd destroyed the family, but I deleted it without a second thought. Dad never reached out at all, which hurt more than I cared to admit, but I was learning to live with that particular wound. The house felt different now that it was truly mine. I'd converted Sandra's old home office into a dedicated writing space, with Grandma Rose's recipe box displayed prominently on my desk next to her framed photo. The trust funds had given me something I'd never had before, complete freedom to pursue my dreams without fear. My food blog had exploded in popularity after I started sharing the real stories behind Grandma Rose's recipes. Rose's Kitchen Legacy now had over 50,000 followers who hung on every word as I documented my journey through traditional Southern cooking with modern twists. 3 cookbook publishers had reached out after seeing my viral post about the recipe box that changed my life. The Nashville scene had offered me a regular column called Heritage Plates, where I explored the cultural history behind iconic Tennessee dishes. Food Network had even contacted me about a potential web series featuring young Southern food writers. Each opportunity felt like vindication of every dream Sandra had tried to crush. But the real victory came in smaller moments. Last week, I'd received an email from a young woman in Memphis whose own family had dismissed her culinary dreams. She'd found my blog after Googling "Following Your Passion Despite Family Opposition," and wanted to thank me for showing her that it was possible to choose your own path. I'd started hosting monthly story and supper events in my dining room, where local food writers and chefs gathered to share recipes and personal stories. The same table where Sandra had banished me now hosted conversations about creativity, authenticity, and the courage to follow your dreams despite opposition. On quiet evenings, I'd sit on the front porch with my laptop, working on my cookbook proposal while the sounds of Nashville hummed in the background. The book would be called Rose's Recipes, A Granddaughter's Journey Through Southern Heritage, and I already had a publisher interested in the concept. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking about Dad, wondering if he ever regretted staying silent when Sandra turned our home into a battlefield. But those moments of sadness were growing shorter, replaced by gratitude for the new family I'd found in the Nashville food community. Levi Rodriguez, a food photographer who'd started documenting my Heritage Plates column, had become a close friend and creative collaborator. Sarah Chun, who ran a successful catering business focused on farm-to-table events, had become my business mentor and the sister I'd never had. Together, we were planning to launch a food writers collective that would support other aspiring culinary storytellers who needed encouragement and resources. Standing in my kitchen, holding Grandma Rose's worn wooden spoon, I felt her presence in every corner of the house she'd made sure would be mine. Her trust hadn't just given me financial security, it had given me the confidence to believe in my own voice, to know that my stories and recipes mattered. I opened my laptop and began typing the final chapter of my cookbook proposal, my fingers steady and sure. The story wasn't finished, my story, the one I was writing on my own terms, with my own dreams as the guiding star. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was and where I belonged. And it felt like coming home.